Hello and welcome back to 20th Century Dude. Today I'm going to be showing you my top 10 favorite movies of all time. Now, granted, I'm not a big fan of the so called ranking system. I don't think that's a definitive way of, I guess, discussing or elaborating on a movie's so called quality. But in this case, I mean, this top 10 was sort of easy to put together. It's sort of a semi-comprehensive list of what I think would be my top 10 favorite movies of all time. Some picks are a little... it's not completely there yet. Some films I favor more than others, but I mean, obviously, you'll see what I'm talking about in a minute. So, starting with number 10, I actually had to pick between two of them. So, I wasn't sure what to put as number 10, so honestly, I just decided to do both. So, first up, we have Lord of the Rings The Return of the King, which honestly it doesn't seem to be a whole lot of people's favorite Lord of the Rings movie for some reason. They always seem to be picking The Two Towers or Fellowship of the Ring. Return of the King never seems to make any of those lists for some reason. I don't know why. Maybe I'm the only one where Return of the King is actually my favorite of that trilogy. Because honestly, it's a really extremely satisfying end to the Lord of the Rings trilogy, and I really wished movies like The Rise of Skywalker when it came out would have been more like this, but I think we all know who that movie turned out. But yeah, character storylines and setups are really just properly paid off. You'll notice in the trilogy too, the special effects seem to improve with each movie. I mean, of course, these things were done back to back, but you can really see that the improvement of quality just really shows. That, and it is a faithful adaptation to Tolkien's works, which I appreciate because, I mean, let's be honest, that wouldn't exactly happen now. Not to mention, I think the extended edition for this movie, it does it some justice in parts. There's a scene where Saruman actually dies, and I do kind of wonder why that really wasn't in the original cut of the movie for some reason. But yeah, the extended edition was also pretty nice too. And again, the musical score here at its biggest and its best. So this also has the best score out of the entire trilogy, in my opinion. So another film I had to pick on the top 10. I wasn't sure which one to pick, but we have Christopher Nolan's The Dark Knight. So this is actually the second one in the Dark Knight trilogy, and honestly, this is the only superhero film I'd probably put on my top 10. And usually, honestly, with the exception of Batman, I'm more of a Marvel guy than a DC guy. I just find Marvel to be more interesting. Sometimes, no, not always, but sometimes Marvel has made better stuff than DC. I mean, if it's one of those things you're comparing MCU to DCEU, that's no competition. But then I remember the Dark Knight trilogy exists. It's like, yeah, that's probably better than the MCU. But in this case, I think, yeah, DC made probably the best superhero movie of all time. And it's better than Marvel stuff. Even Spider-Man 2, I think it probably would be my favorite Marvel movie of all time. And I don't know if it would even touch the top 10 list. Top 20 maybe, but not 10. Because honestly, right at the very beginning, this film establishes the proper tone. It has proper stakes all throughout. And Heath Ledger is just the perfect Joker. I mean, this is the guy, when he was cast, everybody was, of course, oh, Heath Ledger is the Joker? Are you kidding me? What are you doing? But he actually turned out to be the perfect guy for the role. Unfortunately, Jack Nicholson warned him of the mental consequences this role would put on you once you assume the role of Joker, and that shows as Heath Ledger became super dedicated to the role, and unfortunately ended up dying as a result. And I'm gonna be honest, Heath Ledger's Joker, probably one of my favorite movie villains of all time. Just that iteration of the character, anyway. So, in number 9, we have the original Jurassic Park, which honestly, and I think this is probably obvious for a lot of the audience, this is the best movie ever about dinosaurs. Just hands down. I don't know if you're going to find a better movie about dinosaurs made. that isn't better than Jurassic Park. And not to mention, I made a lot of great memories with this movie. Not to mention, it's actually a competent movie. Not only the story, but just the chemistry between the characters, and even the cast they have, because everybody is just nailing at it. I can't say the same about some of the later movies. The story and the character chemistry just isn't as on par with later Jurassic Park sequels. Even the Jurassic World stuff, probably, obviously. I mean, you compare this with like Jurassic World Dominion, and they are light years apart as far as quality goes. I mean, but Dominion's the worst one in the franchise anyway, and that's a duh. And yeah, in case it also wasn't obvious, the special effects in this movie, for being a 1993 movie, is somehow better than almost all movies and TV like put together now. Like the CG has just aged phenomenally. Of course, there might be a shot or two in here. It doesn't look the greatest. But yeah, I mean, the special effects are so top notch after like what 30 some years now at this point. So yeah, just this film gets all the pluses and none of the minuses for me. So at number 8 we have Back to the Future, the first one. And still, I think, yes, this is probably the greatest movie about time travel ever made. I don't know how many people are really going to dispute that. As far as the special effects are concerned, it really does come off as, I guess, almost semi-real, almost. I mean, it blends in really well with everything else. There's nothing in here that is going to, like, age poorly or, like, blend in poorly, like the background of their characters or anything like that. I mean, there is maybe one shot or two shots or doesn't look the greatest, but other than that, it looks almost real, to be honest. And yeah, I mean, it has, the nostalgia for the 80s and the 50s. Doesn't really overdo it. It just kind of fits naturally in with both time periods. I feel like if this movie were made now, both time periods would be focused on remember the thingy, kind of the thing we do in movies nowadays. It's like, oh, you remember this thing? You really like this thing. Remember? Oh, remember when this was a thing? Which I feel like years from now, when they make a movie about the 2010s, they're going to really hit you on the nose with this meme. Remember this meme? Remember Vine? That's sort of where we're at now. But it doesn't overdo it with the 1950s and 1980s as far as nostalgia is concerned, which is really just greatly appreciated. It just all blends in sort of naturally. And I think also as well with this film, the more I think about it nowadays, the more I'm just happy that Bob Gale and Robert Zemeckis have put their foot down and have basically said, we're not making any more after the third one. I'm pretty sure they didn't even want to do a second and third one to begin with. But I think like that, yeah, more than ever, it was made clear. Back to the Future Part 3, it had the end on the title. That was it. Again, I used to want more of these movies when I was younger. Like, the third one sort of left the door open. I mean, there was still a time machine, like the train time machine, still out there. So it's not like characters couldn't use it to time travel anywhere they wanted. But again, I think it's one of those things where the more I think about it, the more I'm like, yeah, it's probably good we don't have more, to be honest. Not only are Robert Zemeckis and Michael J. Fox really, really old at this point. I mean, obviously Michael J. Fox has his Parkinson's, which is unfortunately worsened at this point. And not to mention, I don't feel like any of the new characters are gonna just... it's not gonna gel well with the audience, I guess. It sort of is also, again, the Jurassic World problem. We don't like those characters enough, as much as we did Alan Grant or Ian Malcolm or Ellie Sattler, any of those characters. They just don't work as well. So I feel like the same would be good for Back to the Future if they, soft rebooted it or did it 4, 5, and 6, which I initially wanted, but the more I think of it, the more I'm like, yeah, I'm good with just this one and the other two. So coming up at number 7, we have Forrest Gump, which I have here on DVD. And honestly, this is just a great emotional movie told through a very naive but very relatable lens, that being the Forrest Gump character. But what I find interesting is it actually portrays the counterculture through I guess, almost a negative light. Because most of the time you see the counterculture through the 60s and 70s being portrayed more positively. It's more progressive from a, I guess, socio-political standpoint, or help progressing things like, civil rights. We had the anti-war movement with Vietnam. Of course, the sexual revolution and all that, and just opening up the door for many things and many lifestyles. But this just kind of paints counterculture maybe not in the best of light period, which I do find to be interesting. I mean, some criticize this film for being ultra conservative, which it's not. But I mean, I do find that very interesting in this movie. And I do like it could just balance all sort of genres like comedy and drama and war and all sort of other historical like period pieces. It balances all of that well. Like all of it just feels like natural in this movie, which I do really like. What I do find fascinating after all these years that my VHS copy, which I don't have pictured here of my DVD, the quality looks almost as good as the DVD. I don't know, it doesn't, maybe it was played like once or something, but the quality is just terrific on that tape. I don't know what it is. Not to mention that this film was, I mean, fast-paced, but it's fast-paced properly. Like, you're not going to get bored. It hits all the story beats well, and it's still a very good story overall. And I guess finally, the special effects in this they're more subtle than anything else a lot of the time, but they're just great. I mean, they all blend in well. Even things as like they changed the color of the sky. Like, that wouldn't have been something I would just know off the top of my head. Oh, they changed the sky. But they went and did that, and you wouldn't have known any differently that, oh, they went and changed the color of the sky. Just all these great subtle special effects that really still hold up to this day. And up at number 6 we have Citizen Kane, which I have here on Blu-ray. And I mean, yeah, it's one of the greatest movies of all time for a reason. There's still a reason for that. And I'm not going to argue anybody, well, I've seen a whole bunch that's better. And I mean, sure, it's number 6 here on my list because there are some personal favorites. But if it wasn't for these personal favorites, this would easily make like my top 3 of the list. I mean, again, it's one of the greatest movies of all time. It's never going to change. And this is a movie where, hello Zoomers, black and white movies are engaging and not boring. And this is a good example of that. There have been very few black and white movies that I've seen that are absolutely boring as the dickens. Very few. And this movie is very innovative in almost every sense of the word, as far as, again, subtle special effects, perfect lighting, perfect cinematography. It just all works. I mean, this is coming from Orson Welles, who was a perfectionist himself. Like, all of this just works. This movie just plain works. And I think emotionally, the last 5 to 10 minutes of the movie, it just all pays off at the end. Especially when they toss this rosebud sled in the fire, and then you realize what it actually was and what it symbolized for the entire movie. Like, it really hits home, like, oh crap, this is what Charles Foster Kane literally lost in his life. He had the heart of his childhood represented in this sled, and now is essentially just taken away from him. And that's why the rest of the movie sort of happens the way it does. Like, everything just makes sense, and it hits you with the emotional, like, oh, wow, okay. So also, if this doesn't have one of the greatest endings of all time, I mean, I don't know what doesn't. So up next, we have, actually, The Godfather Parts 1 and 2. but I have The Godfather here, the first one, just on beta. And I have part 1 and 2 both in the same place. Honestly, because I don't have a preference between the two of them because I sort of like the both of them the same, to be honest. They're basically two perfect movies that to me are equal to each other. I mean, the second one obviously serves as like a companion piece of the first one, but still, like, the acting and the cast are all perfectly put together in all of them. And almost every frame is like a perfectly painted picture. It's like a perfect painting. Like every shot in this movie. Probably more so the first one. And the score is just, it's phenomenal. I mean, I'd say the second one's probably more my favorite score than the first one, but each of these movies has a quality. It's like this one has something better than the other, but they're really good. Again, it's like Citizen Kane. They're both some of the greatest movies of all time for a reason. And I can't, for the life of me, after like 4 or 5 years, I can't pick a favorite. I don't know which one is better than the other because I like them both the same, because they're both equal, in my opinion. Unfortunately, 3 didn't make the list because I think we all know part 3 is not up to par with the first two. I don't think it's as horrible as other people say. Some people really, really hate on it, but I feel like part 3 is just sort of almost average compared to parts 1 and 2. It doesn't have it as good. And up next we have Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan, my top 4, and this is where we're going to start hitting the personal favorites, probably. The second Star Trek movie is just really a great way to continue on with the cast of the original series. Probably a little better than the motion picture did, although I don't think the motion picture is terribly horrible either. It was just kind of kind of start. And I think what's great about this movie is it's a sequel to the Space Seed episode from season 1 of the original 60s program. But if you really think about it, it's not like it's really required as homework. You could probably watch The Wrath of Khan and not watch Space Seed, and you'd still understand what's going on. You can probably infer that Kirk and Khan have a past together, but it wasn't a good past, and now Khan's out for revenge, right? Like, you wouldn't typically need the Space Seed episode. I mean, it's good if you go and watch it before you head right into this movie, but it's not like it's like a requirement and you're going to be clueless as to what's going on. I mean, nowadays, it'd be like you'd have to watch like 12 different episodes from like 5 different TV series just to understand like what's going on in one movie. Times were different back then, and I don't feel like that. I don't feel like this modern format of basically having to do your homework just to watch 1 or 2 movies would have worked as well in the 80s. So maybe it's a good thing the MCU debuted when it did. I don't know if the MCU would have worked as well back then. But we also have some phenomenal acting between, Ricardo Montalban, and of course Bill Shatner. But I don't feel like, some people feel like Montalban overacts in this movie. I don't think he does. Like, I think he's actually great. I mean, he hams it up maybe a little bit. But I think he's portraying the character the way he just really needed to be. And again, we have another great score from James Horner. It's a fantastic score, probably one of my favorite soundtracks of all time. And I think even the composer probably liked it so much. You can see it kind of, it sort of comes through even in other movies. Like, I hear Wrath of Khan cues in, like, Aliens. There are parts of Aliens, I'm like, that sounds like Wrath of Khan. Oh, wait, they share the same composer. No wonder. I even heard some of the same Wrath of Khan cues in the Rocketeer movie, if any of you have heard about that. And again, like Jurassic Park, this movie, I just have some personal favorite memories I've made with this movie. There's a particular 2 summers where I just watch this and the Jurassic Park stuff on repeat. And I just remember those special summers because of these films. And I also think this is the only Star Trek film to properly rival the original Star Wars trilogy. I think in terms of like its quality and goodness. The other Star Trek movies, not really, no, because I hold the original trilogy in like the gold standard for best trilogies of all time. And of course, there's always the war between Star Wars and Star Trek. I feel like this is the only Star Trek movie probably that's good enough to rival the original Star Wars trilogy. And honestly, speaking of original Star Wars trilogy, we have on number three, Star Wars: The Empire Strikes Back, which I have here on CED. And yeah, this is another one of those examples where it's one of the most competent and best sequels ever, for a reason. It's the best Star Wars movie of all time for a reason, because there's believable actions from every one of the characters. It continues the story from A New Hope in a extremely interesting, but I think necessary way. A lot of the special effects they still hold up pretty much. And when George did the special editions in the 90s and 2000s, I don't think the special edition version of that movie hurts it as badly as something like Return of the Jedi and A New Hope. Like Return of the Jedi looks embarrassing with all the changes he made in that movie, but The Empire Strikes Back, it actually comes off as kind of okay for the special edition versions, which is basically what we've been watching since 1997 at this point. I Am Your Father, it's one of the best plot twists of all time. Like, unless you watch like the prequels first, that it's not gonna make it as special though. But if you just watch A New Hope and then you watch this movie and you have no idea what's coming, it just like hits you over the head. Like, whoa, what, what is this? What happened? And the fact that very few of the cast even knew about that twist, like Mark was informed about it like just minutes before he went to film the scene. Of course, they had it said that Obi-Wan killed your father on set, but of course they went back and redubbed it. Even James Earl Jones thought that they were lying with this plot twist, that Darth Vader was lying, that he couldn't possibly be telling the truth, except that he was. So I can only imagine sitting in the theaters back in 1980, and that plot twist just hits in the theater. I can't imagine what the reception and what even the tone of the room like that's just one of those theatrical experiences I wish I could have experienced, because that just would have been something. But we also have a great score from John Williams. I think this is probably his best Star Wars score. Some say Revenge of the Sith is his best score, and I think that is a very good Star Wars score. But again, this one's probably a personal favorite for me. But it's a film that just hits home more than all the other Star Wars movies for me. I watched the most, it does a lot more for me. And up in number two, we have the original Transformers the movie, actually, which I have here on tape. It's probably my most, I guess the most prized thing I have on my home video upstairs, because it's a movie that, like, changed me forever. I can remember the exact birthday I had watching this movie. I can remember almost beat for beat what I was doing that day before I watched it this night with my dad and sister. Like, I remember, visiting some people in the old neighborhood I used to live in. I remember going to the library, and I actually remember getting this film on tape, because this is one, like, a couple months after I was introduced to the original Transformers that, of course, my dad and uncle grew up and watched. And I had watched most of the series at this point. I want to say this is, what, my 8th birthday? I think it was my 8th birthday, yes. So I decided, since we finished Season 1, we got through almost all of Season 2, we figured, why not treat ourselves to this movie? And boy, as an 8-year-old, didn't I get my mind blown. Like, I was not expecting any of this. I mean, I think we know now that a lot of the Transformers die because they wanted to start a new toy line, including Optimus Prime. But once they just start killing them off and killing them off and killing them off, it's like, oh, wow, this is this is darker and grittier than what we got in the show. My goodness, I mean, there's something that literally got flattened by like a tank, and they were still okay. But they got some of them just got plain shot, and that was it. Yeah, they were done, including Optimus Prime. Where it was like, they did that, didn't they? they just killed off Optimus Prime. Like even the opening threw me off because I thought we were at Cybertron, and then Unicron went and ate up the planet, and it's like, oh my God, Cybertron's gone. Oh wait, that wasn't Cybertron. Oh wait, that wasn't Cybertron. Oh, they're safe. Whew. But yeah, it's a very interesting, but I guess it was a very controversial way of continuing Transformers, that Generation 1 cartoon. And it's also the movie that got me into 1980s music, period. Like that, this is where my love of the 1980s came from. It's from this movie. It's probably why it's the highest ranking 80s movie probably on the list, because it's the movie that got me into the 80s in the first place, especially in the music, because the soundtrack is just awesome. Probably my favorite soundtrack of all time, I'm not gonna lie. Like, listening to it as a kid, it's like, this is great. What decade is this from again? 1980s, you say? Okay, well, 1980s music is this good, and I gotta listen to more. It's also easy quotable too, which is that, but I don't know. Like, to me, this is the best thing that ever happened to this franchise. But I've also watched this movie on this tape, like, so many times. This should be broken by now. Like, it's had to been hundreds and hundreds and hundreds at this point. And this tape should be dead. And somehow it still works. So, I mean, hey, VHS tapes can't be that bad if this movie still works after, like, what? How many times I played and how many times it was probably played between, I guess, 80s and 90s and now? Like, can't be that bad. It still works. And this is still the predominant way I watch this movie, actually. And actually, at number one, this is going to be a surprise for many people unless I dropped a hint throughout some of my other videos. This is my favorite movie of all time. Of course, an easy one I just had to have on Laserdisc. We have the original Toy Story, actually, believe it or not. This is one that surprises people. People that know me well kind of expect, like, Citizen Kane or Empire Strikes Back or even like The Godfather or something to be on the top of the list. And it's not. It's actually this movie. Because honestly, it's one of the first movies that I remember seeing as a young kid. I probably wasn't even the age of 1 yet when I see it. I just remember sort of what was going on and all the characters and colors and, I don't know, whatever you can interpret a movie as before you're 1 year old. But honestly, I wouldn't be here or at film school or have done what I have done in life. I wouldn't be anywhere really without this film. I owe a lot of it just because I just happened to watch this one Pixar movie as a kid. It got me into Pixar, but yeah, it's my favorite movie of all time for a reason. I mean, Sheriff Woody is also probably my favorite movie character of all time. The innovative CGI animation, I think, still holds up well. I mean, I don't think there's anything in here that looks, like, horrible. I mean, obviously, if you compare it to, like, Toy Story 4 or something now, of course, it's going to look a little inferior. But, hey, it's the 1990s, and you'd want the technology to improve somewhat, right? You don't want it to look exactly the same or worse than what it did when it came out. It's sort of the Jurassic Park problem there. But the CG animation, it looks great. Oh, and I should probably talk about this Laserdisc too. This is actually the only way you can have the film version. And what I mean by film version is like the film stock you would have seen at like the movie theaters at the time. This is the only home video release of the movie that would have had it. Because all the VHS and DVD and Blu-ray and streaming stuff, it borrows from the digital source, which is straight from the computer. This borrows from actual film stock, and this is the only home video release ever that actually borrows from the film source. So, of course, I had to go grab it for that extra reason too. But yeah, that's the original Toy Story, and it's my favorite movie of all time. And I don't think I'm ever gonna budge on it, to be honest. So other than that, yeah, that's all my top 10 favorite movies of all time. I apologize, it's turned out to be a longer movie than what I planned on, but I just wanted to share all the movies I hold, honestly, the most dear to myself. So I don't know, are there any of these movies that would be on your top 10 favorites? I don't know, what order would you put them in? So I guess let me know down in the comments below what your favorite movies are. And if there's anything on this list that you agree should be on there, or you think, well, I don't know why you like that film, then you should take that off. They're all pretty likable films, so I don't know if there's anything on here that people are going to hate. But otherwise, I hope you enjoyed this little entry into 20th Century Dude. Stay tuned for more content, obviously, and hope to see you next time. So, see ya.